Hey guys, this is going to be a really interesting episode of the Gimble and Orange Show. Today we've got a really incredible lineup. We've got Michael Bolton III, we've got Kil2, we've got CCP Bro. It's going to be pretty sensational. But the thing I want to say before we actually get into it is a caveat, and that is normally the show in the past has focused a lot on SC2, and that's where my main body of knowledge lies. So this show is not going to be, it's going to be in depth as we can get it, but I will say some pretty stupid things. So you guys can call me out on it. So that's, I'm no Eve expert and I won't pretend to be. But I love the ideas behind Eve. I love the community. Everything I've seen from the community, I find really incredible and unique in a very compelling way. And I'd like to explore that. And that's a lot of what I'm hoping to get at in this interview. So the other thing I will say before we actually get started is questions. If you have them, we'll ask them at the beginning of the end of the first half and the end of the second half. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat. Gimble is hopefully going to get some for me, and I'm going to do my best to keep up with them, but we'll ask them probably in about a half an hour. All right, all that's out of the way. Who to start with? I said Michael Bolton first. Michael Bolton, for those who may not know you, small as they may be, give us an introduction of yourself.
I am Michael Bolton III. I am an Alliance diplomat for Test Alliance Please Ignore. I was recently an Alliance Tournament expert for Alliance Tournament 10 and was previously one for Alliance Tournament 9. People who haven't seen me in the Alliance Tournament may have seen me at this year's and last year's FanFest doing the Alliance Tournament panel, or the Alliance Leader panel, although I'm not the Alliance Leader of Test Alliance. We're the second largest alliance in EVE and hold more space than any other alliance in the game.
Kil2, would you like to give us an introduction of yourself?
Sure. I don't know how far back to go, but I've been playing Eve for quite a while. I originally was known by more than 4 people in the game because of making some videos. Eve has kind of a history of PvP videos that are sort of in line with like WoW PvP videos or other MMO videos, I guess. And so I did those, and then more recently I've been an Alliance Tournament expert for 5 years now. I'm not in a big alliance. I'm kind of a small, like poor man's PvPer, sort of, kind of trying to be like someone who promotes the smaller scale side of the game. And most recently, I've started live streaming Eve PvP, which is something that's sort of new, and trying to kind of help get that scene going, I guess.
Yeah, I know Gimble in particular has been is often I actually haven't been able to tune in, but Gimble tunes in quite often. And he's always relays back whatever's going on and throws me the link so I can tune in to see. But the problem is I never have any idea what's going on. Gimble will sit there and talk to coach me through everything, and I still just it's still too complicated. But hopefully maybe today I can get a little light shed. CCP Bro, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Hey, I'm CCP Bro, and I've been working for CCP for just over a year. I work mainly as a game master, but in recent past, I've been working towards getting up the streaming scene, player streams. I was a stream manager for the Alliance Tournament, and been working a lot towards getting EVE gameplay in real time publicly available to everyone. Yeah. So
for those who do StarCraft 2, he's sort of like the gun run of EVE Online.
I don't know what that means.
It means you're a god among men.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone should love you.
Sounds good.
So Eve is obviously the thing we're going to focus on for most of the show. But before that, I do always like to ask the guests about where they come from, not just in the game that they specialize in or that they focus most heavily in, but also gaming in general. There's usually some game that people remember that just sticks out to them. And so maybe starting with you, CCP Bro, what's the first game that really caught your eye that you played?
First game? Wow. That's actually pretty hard. I played Dota 1 a lot. Then I transitioned from Dota over to League of Legends, and I played that in tournaments a lot in esports, and played against SK and those big teams for a while. Then I started working. I actually didn't play Eve before I started working at CCP. I knew a bunch about the game and I knew what it was about, but I never really got into it because I thought it was just too much time investment for me while being in school and stuff. So, but I picked it up after I started working for CCP and absolutely fell in love with it. And that's pretty much that, along with League of Legends, are the games of my heart right now.
Well, I actually want to just keep with that for a second. What when you did actually get around to really trying Eve and getting into it, besides also the incentive of working with CCP, what is it that you found so attractive?
Pretty much the scale of the game. It's just it's so unique, and you won't find the experience you get in Eve anywhere else. For me, the game takes place a lot in your head. It's a lot of theory crafting and pondering, and then when I PvP'd for the first time in Eve, that was just something. You got the shakes, you got like the PvP shakes. You were flying a ship that I've been like grinding for a month or something, and I was like, I didn't realize the old saying, "Don't fly what you can't afford to lose," actually applied. I thought it was just like something people said, and then I lost my ship and my heart was pounding and my head was racing. Like, what did I do? I messed that up so entirely, and I had never experienced that in any other game. Not even playing tournaments in League of Legends, like finals and stuff. That was just nothing compared to the feeling of the first PvP in Eve.
That's fantastic. I wish I could share my own experience, but the only PvP experience I've had has been waiting at gates, and we got unlucky that night. But maybe one day I'll get to experience the joy and horror of investing a lot in a ship and then deciding it's a good idea to take it out on a first flight and getting it smashed.
It isn't. It isn't a good idea. I can attest to that. But it was an awesome experience and totally worth it actually. But for your next month or so, like getting back on your feet is going to be hard.
Yeah, it's true.
Fly small ships. Small ships are fun.
Yeah, they are.
There you go. Well, Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself too. What was the first game that really caught your eye, and why?
Actually, I would have described myself as cliche as a hardcore gamer since I was like a really little kid. Believe it or not, the first game that I ever played like full out was Battletoads for the NES. Like for those of you who don't know Battletoads for the NES, maybe you've called your local GameStop to ask if they had it in stock. But Battletoads for the NES was a game which was notoriously hard. It's still listed as one of the hardest games of all time, mostly because it had these racing levels that were pretty much impossible. Like, even if you memorized the entire racing level, the game got to a point where it was so fast, where it was pretty much like split-second timing, tighter timing than almost any game I've ever played. And I beat that game once and was never able to do it again. But that moment when I was on that track where I beat the game was like the most heart-pounding, exciting moment of no, I wouldn't say my entire life, but of my gaming experience. It was awesome, and like replicating that experience has been like what I've done in video games since. I did it the next with Punch Out, dodging Mike Tyson's rapid blows, and then eventually made my way along a circuitous route which involves StarCraft 64, the StarCraft game for Nintendo 64, all the way up to a big boy computer, and then StarCraft 2, League of Legends, eventually ending up in EVE Online, which really enticed me based on the fact that, like, first of all, when you PvP, if you're like PvPing high risk, like you're the FC, you do get that handshaking, heart beating moment, which is really like weird and it's really hard to get over. It takes a long time. I still get it sometimes if I get in trouble or if something happens I don't expect, like I get hot dropped with caps or something. Capital ships, by the way, caps, yeah. My lingo. But so you get that sort of stuff in EVE Online, and then there's also the game that I'm probably more involved in the actual physical game of EVE Online, which everyone sort of refers to as EVE Offline, where it's people in Jabber clients, people talking to people on Mumble, people sending EVE mails back and forth through EVEGate, trying to talk to all the people and set stuff up, and realizing that the game is sort of a group of people who have all picked their specialization and want to work on being the best at their one thing, and then becoming known for that. Like there's a guy who's like the expert on placing stations in space, like what station you want to put where, why is it good to put it here. There's experts on all sorts of stuff, market experts, people figuring out loopholes in the game, people like high-level block FCs, small gang FCs. There's a guy who flies a saber better than anyone else. Like EVE Online is so many games that I felt like it was more approachable. Like I'm never going to be Marine King, I'm never going to be MVP, just because that's not my thing. But EVE Online, somewhere in EVE Online, I feel like everyone can find their thing that they can be like the best, or at least high level, close to the best, good at, if they really try. And that's what really draws me to EVE Online.
Well, can I ask you then? So that drew you to Eve, and then how did you end up to where you are now, being the diplomat? Like, how did you find that specialization for yourself? How did you find that calling?
Well, I sort of got sucked into a brand new alliance, Test Alliance Please Ignore. We're only 2 years old at this point, which is brand new in EVE Online. And we're from Reddit.com. We're the Reddit Corp. So I joined on the first day, and I joined with a collection of very unique individuals. People from EVE Online might recognize names like Herder, people like that. And sort of got caught up in the group of people who were known as personalities. Went to my first fan fest in 2011. Did the Alliance Leader panels, talked to a lot of people there, found out I really enjoyed talking to other alliances, sort of meeting people, making friends, that sort of thing. And it just sort of evolved to there. I was for a long time just pretty much a personality in Test Alliance Please Ignore, and then I eventually got to the point where I was a diplomat. I sort of just had so many contacts and people that I knew that I was doing diplomat work anyway, so they just put the title on my account character, and then I was a diplomat officially.
Right. Well,
being friendly, and like there's different ways you can play EVE Online. Like I'm a very friendly person. I like to work in big groups. Kil2 is not a super friendly person. He likes to solo around. He likes to solo around and kill people, but we're also different in the other way. Like in EVE Online, there's pods, which represent your character. So you can lose your ship, but not lose your pod. And I pod people every time. After I destroy their ship, I immediately go and kill their pod. It's just what you do, but it's considered a mean thing to do. Whereas Kil2, who doesn't really talk to people, likes only PvPing and only fighting, will not kill their pod, which is like, he's a very nice person about that. It's everyone can carve out their little niche, and that's what I like. Niche.
My niche is not killing pods.
No, your niche is going around by yourself in a Naga or Talos. No, Talos. And not killing pods. Yeah, Talos.
Kil2, I actually want to ask you about that in a second, about small PvP. But before that, I do want to ask you real quick, where did you first start gaming, and how did you find your way to EVE?
Sure. My history is way more MMO focused, I guess, than these guys that seem to be pretty RTS focused. But like Bolton, I was a pretty obsessive console gamer as a kid. Certainly didn't beat Battletoads, but I was kind of in that same track. And then when we got a computer, the first thing we found was EverQuest, me and my brothers. And I was a pretty diehard EverQuest guy for a long time, EQ1. And there was a lot of stuff in between EQ and EVE, but those two definitely have the biggest chunks of my time. I think in between I played pretty much everything that was around, both MMOs and also other stuff. I played a little bit of Warcraft 3. I played a little bit of StarCraft 1. I played a lot of Diablo 2. And more recently I was like, I don't know, I was like Diamond StarCraft 2 after beta and like during beta, but haven't played a lot recently. And so there's been some things in between, but that's all kind of been during EVE, I guess, since I started EVE. Would it be like 2005 or something like that?
Well, yeah. Well, I just wanted to ask real quick about EverQuest. What was the thing that drew you into EverQuest first, and then did that also capture you in EVE, or was there something different about EVE that you really enjoyed?
Okay, so with EverQuest, I was just young enough that I wasn't really aware of MUDs or of Ultima for the most part. So I actually remember seeing a magazine ad on like a PC Gamer or something that showed multiple people like in a group killing a hill giant or whatever. And that was like the first time the idea of massive multiplayer really kind of clicked for me, and that seemed unbelievably cool. I mean, the idea that you could have a world that actually was big enough to warrant having a map, and that you could explore it as you wanted to and find other people and then do things together was like extremely compelling. And so that got me hooked. That whole idea, which looked good in advertising and was just as exciting as it as I thought it might be, was what hooked me to Eve. And then hooked me to EQ. And then for Eve, it was a little different. I was excited about the scale of the game, the idea of people actually controlling things, but what really got me to try it was the level of freedom that Eve offered in terms of player interaction, because traditional MMOs are so restricted. You do things that are sort of laid out for you, and there's a lot of rules. And the thing I remember really specifically about Eve is seeing a clip, a video somewhere of someone ransoming someone else, of a ship actually like getting someone to where they were almost dead and then saying, "I'll let you go if you pay me." That level of social freedom was like incredibly enticing to me. I like.
Did they let them go
had
at the
to
end?
with somebody. Huh?
Did they
Yeah,
let them
they
go
did.
after they got the money?
Well,
Oh
no,
wow.
in the video they didn't pay, so they just
Yeah.
died. But yeah, I had to ransom somebody. That seemed like incredible. But since getting into the game, it's funny, that has sort of changed a little bit. For me now, I feel like it's moved a little bit away from like the social complexity, which is maybe more where Bolton is, in negotiations and deals and kind of all that. I'm less involved in that now and more involved in just the complexity of the combat. I think Eve has one of the deepest systems for PvP to take place in terms of mechanics and emergence and all these things, that I'm just continuously interested in it, because it manages to constantly produce unique situations, which like keeps my mind working really hard. I never see the same, build order twice, if you will. And I like that a lot. It means there's always room for creativity. There's always room to improve, which keeps me around, I guess.
Well, can I ask you, sort of focusing in on that, if you tend to, why is it then that you tend to favor sort of smaller PvP as opposed to the larger alliance battles?
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons. One is, as Michael Bolton loves to say, I'm a bit antisocial, so dealing with really large groups tends to frustrate me eventually. But a bigger reason would be that as groups get bigger, individual responsibility diminishes. So there's a couple people in really large fleets that are very important. You might have a couple scouts that are really important, and a couple leaders that are like generals, if you will, that are really important. But for the most part, people involved in those conflicts have less individual responsibility in terms of piloting and decision making than people at a small scale do. So I kind of take that to the extreme by often wanting to be completely alone or be in groups of only 2 or 3. And there's a whole spectrum of in between where the level of individual responsibility ranges depending on exactly what you're doing and exactly how many people you have. But I think that's why I like small scale, because it gives you a lot of personal, like accountability for what actually happens, rather than just kind of being another guy DPSing,
Right. You really, in small PvP, your contribution really matters, and if you succeed, you really contributed, and if you fucked it up, well, you really fucked it up.
Yeah. And you can really feel that in the engagements. I mean, it's there's so many decisions to make that someone who's bad is really very bad and can cripple like your efforts completely, and someone who, there's like gifted people who can make things work at a small scale in Eve that others just can't, and that's.
And also, like, when you do a small gang PvP experience, you're more likely to then fight another small gang, and basically the larger a gang is, the more likely that gang is ultimately controlled by a person with more EVE Online experience and who's making better decisions, backed up by just the pure numbers of having more people. So when you're in that small thing, you're saying, here's my skill level. You as a person must exceed that skill level or have circumstances aligned to help you such that you are able to beat me, rather than I'm fighting, like, once you have 100 people in a fleet, even if you're in DFC, you're going up against another FC who is top 100 in EVE Online, probably. So it sort of becomes like you're dictating, you're saying, fight me, random person, I've just run into not fight me person who's heard about my gang and then has 20 minutes to assemble a whole fleet and all that sort of thing.
Right.
It's more immediate.
I'm hoping. One of the things that there's so much I want to talk about. One of the things that I think CCP Bro really hit on that I want to ask CCP Bro again, but ask both of you as well, is since playing Eve and Kil2, I know you also really hit on this with the ransom or the bounty. Excuse me. Is there a moment or like a storyline that just for you encapsulates what Eve is about, or you find you can't get on, you can't forget about it, like something that's happened at Eve that sticks out to you that you would be willing to share?
You
Yeah,
want
I
a second to
actually.
think, bro? Or do you,
No,
you
I
got one?
actually have one off the top of my head.
Do it.
Which kind of encompasses the don't mess up mentality of Eve, and that was when I was rattled by my first PvP encounter, and I really wanted to get into PvPing, so I joined Red versus Blue, and which is like two corporations that are constantly at war with each other, so they can always fight, and I had no idea what it was about, and I took the remainder of my money and I fitted out like a really pimp ship because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to that RVP and slam everyone. And I was flying to their home station, and I had applied to the corp, and they accepted me while I was in space. So I jumped into a 40-man gate camp alone, like 10 seconds after they accepted me. And that was just me not paying attention. And that was like, I jumped into the enemy's home system, into a fleet of 40, in my ship that I had just fitted out, like with all my money again. So I had no idea how to react there because I had never been in that situation before. In most cases, you would just try to burn back to the gate and try to jump back through and warp away after that. But I just tried to warp to the station. So I pretty much just ran into my doom and lost my beautiful cruiser and almost the remainder of my ISK. I actually had a friend of mine give me like 5 million so I could fit out a few frigates and PvP in the days after that. Before I had to go back to grinding, but that was like it only takes like 5 seconds of not paying attention for you to lose everything if you're dumb enough to fly it.
I'm noticing a trend in the stories you're telling.
Yeah, I'm bad at Eve. That's a trend. I'll happily admit I'm bad at Eve.
Is there a well, I was just curious real quick if I could ask Bro, as a quick follow-up, do you have a triumphant story you can tell us real quick? Like, is there a moment?
Yeah, I actually,
okay.
On my second day, I FC'd a fleet, and we fought outnumbered like 2-1, and I led them to victory with really good target calling and stuff. Well, according to the people in the fleet, I don't know how much of that was true, but we won, and I felt really good about myself, and I was like, yeah, I'm getting good at Eve. But then for that triumphant story, I have like 10 stories where I absolutely sucked and just got blown up. But that was like my big victory in Eve was piloting a fleet outnumbered 2-1 and actually winning.
Go. Well, there you go. That's more positive. Sorry, Kil2. Please, you were gonna.
No, I'm Bro's fantastic story, sir. Should not be interrupted. I feel sort of bad about mine because I want it to be a story since I was talking about the combat mechanics and the complexity of the actual PvP system. I wish it was about that, but it really has more to do with my original hook from the game, the storytelling part and the ransoming part and the social part. So, my favorite thing that ever happened, I think, was I was roaming with 4 guys. We were in nullsec where anything goes, and we had given up on finding people for the night. We'd been out looking around and nothing really came of it, and we were headed back home. And on the way home, we came across, in the middle of nullsec, a freighter on a gate, alone, which is like the biggest industrial hauling ship that exists in the game. So it can hold like, tons and tons of other ships inside it, and it has no defenses at all, and it's extremely slow. So it's like winning the lottery, basically. And so we catch it, and we're killing it, and we realized that it's like winning the lottery, except if they gave it to you in gold bars, like in the middle of a desert, where we have no way. If we kill it and it's full of money, we have no way to carry it out, right? But it has a lot of value, probably. So we went for a ransom, which is what I was talking about before. We told the guy, we got him really to where he was just about dead, and we said, look, if you give us 1.5 billion ISK, we'll just let you go. And he sent me, after some needling, sent me 1 billion ISK. And so we started shooting him again and demanded that he give us the last 500 million, which he did. And then, and the whole time it's really nerve-wracking because we're still in nullsec. Like, a gang could come on us at any moment and steal our freighter kill and kill all of us. It's like really intense. But he pays us, and then after he pays us, we were like, man, this is just gonna happen again. You shouldn't be out here. And we're like, I tell you what, you give us another 500 million and we'll escort you out. So after collecting the ransom from him, we actually got paid to run escort for this freighter in the middle of nullsec. And that was really unique. I mean, that's something that certainly will never happen again, and probably never has happened to anybody else. So,
Oh,
awesome.
wow.
So my story is sort of very cliche in that it's a very social story. So, but it also has to do with when I first joined the game and like the power of new players in the game. So when Reddit, the Reddit.com corporation, started up, when we were 2.5 days old, we got war decked by a corporation, an alliance called Fear the Vampires, which were basically pets of Cry Havoc, like rented space from Cry Havoc, and then Cry Havoc, who sort of rented space from a big alliance called Evoke in a region called Cloud Ring. And so, but they were the big deal. They had super carriers, they had a capital fleet, they had RR battleship fleets, and we were war decked by them, so they could come into our high sec area, which is normally safe, and fight us wherever we wanted. So they come in and decide that, okay, they're big boys, they're going to take us down, and we're all new players. We're all day old, 2 day old, some of us even like just a couple hours old characters. So basically what ends up happening is they send 3 RR Dominixes, which are battleships, the largest ship you can get without it being a capital, and plant them right outside our station, and they're remote repairing each other. So they have really high tank, and they're doing a ton of damage with drones, and they have blasters. Basically, their ship by itself costs like as much as 200 of our small frigate ships. Their ammo alone costs more than probably 5 of them. But in the process of that, they're sitting out there. We decide, all right, we need to kill these guys, otherwise they're just going to camp us in. We're never going to be able to do anything. So we ping. We send out emails. We're all messaging each other. We've gotten onto this TeamSpeak that we had like cobbled together in a day. It was like breaking down every 5 minutes, and we eventually pulled together. I think it was like 300 or 400 new players in the smallest ship you can get in the entire game, just barely above the ship that you get for free at the beginning of the game. And we all get together and we're like, oh god, we need modules. So we had like 10 or 20 players that had played before and sort of had some money, so they like sneak in some modules into the station, and they're like, here, take these modules. They're like basically free. I could go out and buy 1,000 of them right now and not really care. But so we all fit them out. We're fitting them out, and then suddenly these guys have no idea what's coming. We undock in this gigantic swarm, and 300 or 400 frigates just rip apart these battleships that were probably worth about the same cost. But just the sheer, like, emotional feel of just like, yes, we fucking destroyed these dudes. We end up going back, crushing them all the way. They ended up, like, disbanding by the end of it. Or I think that was later. But anyway, we crushed them in this war. But then the converse happened about a week later. Another great thing. We had 2 guys join our corporation who had played before, and they were like, oh, yeah, come on, we'll help you out. And by this point, like, a bunch of people had war decked us because we were, like, 700 people. And we go to Jita to try and do a shopping run because we have no way to get stuff. And they're covering the station. We can't get stuff out. There's no way we can get anything loose. So we're like, all right, we'll send a fleet in and we'll fight our way out. And then these 2 guys are like, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. We'll warp to this planet at 0, warp to this planet, follow my warp, and then we'll go to the station from there. It turns out that those guys actually really didn't like us. They were working for some people that were not our friends, and they had fit their battleships with this sort of area of effect damage device called a smart bomb, and a full rack of 8 smart bombs. So we warped 200 frigates and these 2 battleships to this planet at 0. They light up their smart bombs, and we're all in corpse so they don't get aggressed by the police, and all of our stuff instantly explodes in half a second. So just by them being able to convince us that they were our friends, the same force that had been able to crush these battleships a day earlier with very little losses just wiped us out in seconds flat. Like, no chance of survival. Instantly died everyone. It was our first big scandal. It was actually like super awesome, and that was when I found out that I loved that game online.
There you go. Get betrayed by people in your own corp. Find out you love the game.
That's how you learn you really like EVE Online, when you're just like, oh my god, what just happened?
It's actually true. That's like the possibility of that happening is one of the big things that draws me to EVE. I want to do that, but I'm not allowed.
Yeah, tricking people. So like you can do what is like honorable combat where you're like everyone sort of knows what's going on. But then there's a whole other side of the game where EVE is like the trickiest game, where you never know how many people are potentially on the other end of a sino that may or may not be fitted to that ship you're about to fight, or you don't know if this guy you're talking to is really your friend, or if he's really trying to like just make it look like you're your friend, so you'll give him roles in your corporation and they'll steal all your stuff. Or you don't know if this guy really needs a security deposit so you can join his corporation, or he's just going to take that security deposit and leave. Pro tip for new players, he probably doesn't actually need that security deposit. He's probably just going to take it and not let you join the corp. There's all sorts of like lying and backstabbing, and who do you trust? Like in other games, like the thing that you want is like gear. Like in other MMOs, like whoever has the best gear, like they're the guy, whatever. In EVE Online, it's like whoever has the most trust. Like there's a guy Kriba who everybody trusts, and he is like one of the most richest people in the game just because everyone trusts him, and that he's willing to take like 5% transaction fee to handle really big transactions. And so he's just known for being like he's good at mining. He has like every Titan in the game. He has one of each Titan in the game. He has one of each super capital. And basically just because he's really trustworthy guy, and he runs some good cool services for this nice guy.
Yeah, but he has the opportunity to betray that trust at any point, like the EVE bank dude.
But
like
he could jack everything and just leave.
I mean, he could be handling like 10 Titan transactions and get like 400 bill or something, and you could just say like, all right, guys, peace. I'm gonna keep this. I mean,
right. So that possibility is always there. Well, can I ask you about that, and maybe starting with Kil2, and I promise I do want to talk about esports and what you got your thoughts about that, because I know that came up a lot during ATX in particular. But before we get to that, starting with Kil2, I'm wondering that possibility that you all have cited as being really enjoyable, a really enjoyable aspect of EVE, that you never know what's around the corner. You never know what could happen. A lot of the other MMOs have a lot of built-in restrictions, or they have built-in rules and regulations. So if someone ninja loots or someone backstabs in a guild, there are ways you can get that back. But that's not generally the way it works in EVE. And I'm curious as to why you guys think that's the way EVE has been set up, and why you think it works.
I mean, why it's set up that way is kind of an interesting question. I've always loved the idea that Iceland is this harsh and horrible place where you kind of have to be hardcore to like even survive. And so when they went to design a game, it just like permeated the game environment. That Icelandic mentality of like, doing things yourself and like being kind of hardcore. But at this point, I think CCP's really realized that intentional or not to begin with, they found a niche where there's a huge market for people that want more freedom. There's a market for people that enjoy having the ability to kind of define their experience a little more carefully rather than having it designed for them. And the most recent quote that I know has stirred some attention is the senior producer for EVE Online saying that he isn't really a game, it's a social engine. And I think that's kind of a position that they've taken as a company, that they they want to support an environment that lets people create content, and I think they've realized that. I mean, I personally think the reason the game survives and the reason that it has survived over as many years as it has is that they're pretty unique. They've done at least a uniquely good job of creating an environment where people have control over content that much. I always wonder. I mean, you ask like why it worked, and I always wonder how close it is to some kind of ultimate implosion. I mean, there's certainly been scandals that have put the player base close to revolt against CCP or close to tearing each other apart. And then we're also always feeling a little bit close to this possibility of stagnation where, for whatever reason, things will like work out in a way where there's no conflict in EVE, and then the content just kind of dries up because the lack of control from CCP side goes both ways. If people decide they're not going to create content anymore for whatever reason, then all of a sudden everything stops. And so I don't know. I feel like it is kind of a risk, but it just makes for such a deep gameplay experience. I mean, it's not for everybody. There's the potential. A lot of the situations the other two have described have I think the capacity to drive someone away from the game permanently. If they don't enjoy that risk or enjoy that potential for ruin, I think for a lot of us it adds an edge. I came across this a lot playing hardcore ARPGs like Diablo 3 recently. The hardcore community is 4% of the total community, but for me, the game is unplayable without that edge. Like it needs that potential cost to be a valuable game, and I think CCP is sort of in the same boat, but it's still maybe 4%. I think there's a huge chunk of the gaming population overall that doesn't like that possibility that something really awful could happen to them. It doesn't add an edge to the game. It adds the possibility for just like disappointment and sadness. And so for those people, it doesn't work, but I think there's a lot of people that appreciate it, so it kind of can continue holding this niche.
I think that EVE Online is at its core like a social engine, but it's also a hard game. Like EVE Online is a pretty hard game. People and hard games have been coming back. Like people like games where you have consequences for dying, like Dark Souls, Demon Souls, DayZ. Games where it's not just like, oh, I died, allow me to respawn 10 seconds ago, and then do the same thing I've just been doing over and over again. Like, people play Halo on Legendary. Like, people like games that are going to make them be like rage. But that sort of difficulty allows you to have this experience of achievement when you finally do it. You've done something that not most people can do. You've gotten into Masters League in StarCraft 2. Not a lot of people can do that. You've done these things that not a lot of people can do. And so EVE Online, the lead game designer has also made a famous quote, either that or the executive producer, that EVE Online is sort of like saying, here's a Rubik's Cube, fuck you. So,
yeah.
So, like, people enjoy, like, all those, anything that's difficult has a corresponding sense of achievement when you achieve success. Like, and that's what I really like about EVE Online. Like, EVE Online has a bad reputation for being...
Yeah, the key word there is achieve success.
It's the part where you achieve success that you get but like EVE Online, there's a lot of like failures. You have to understand that like eventually, if you keep working at it, you're gonna find that thing that you're successful at. It's just that everyone else is typically trying to be successful, usually at your expense, at the same time.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask if CCP Bro, if you wanted to add anything.
Not really. I think they talked about most of the points there. It's pretty much, I don't know, when they talk about content drying up and the game being dependent on user created content, that is completely true. And I don't think there's anything that we at CCP could have done to create a game as fantastic as EVE. It's worthless without players, and the player base deserves credit. And I know like a lot of people hate Goonswarm because, well, let's face it, they're dicks in many senses of the word. But at the same time, they provide a lot of good content for their members. It may negatively impact some people, but I mean, they're creating good content for their members, and the opportunity comes for other players to step up to the plate and create content like for their corporation to try to counteract that action. I mean, I wouldn't say that I necessarily morally approve of a bunch of the stuff they do, like, but at the same time, it's this big free world, and they're free to do it, and it's fun for them and their allies and players and so on. And it just puts the challenge into, just puts the ball into the other half of the court, saying, hey, all right, this is what we're doing. Now you guys go figure out a way how to counteract it and mess with us in the way we're messing with you. I mean,
Yeah. I think that EVE Online also takes that like impetus for creation of content and puts it like immediately on you like the very first day. Like once
Yeah.
you're done the tutorial, you're pretty much free to go. Like you can do whatever you want. But like if what you want to do is have fun, you're probably going to have to find a group of people that are in some way creating content that you can then be a part of and create your own content with. Like it's very hard to play EVE Online without playing with other people. There are people that do it. They're crazy
Not so
people.
bad. It's not so bad.
yeah.
No. But
People
you
like
had to
Steve.
play. You have to play with other people, beating them. You create content with people who you fight with. That's
Yeah.
content creation. Like you don't do anything in EVE Online without other people to fight.
No, you're right that you need other people to fight. I felt sort of like arguing with the idea that you need, like, that you are hopelessly lost without some people to go and like cooperate with out of the gate. I think that even though most of the time that's true, it's
Or
not
do you,
as difficult.
Could you imagine trying to play EVE Online without knowing what other people were doing? Like if they were like, here's a ship, here's all the ships in the game, here's all the modules in the game, figure it out.
Well, I didn't do it
what other
by
people would-
myself, but I know that like when we started, me and my brother ran like level 2 missions for a week, so we had enough money to buy a frig or whatever. And then we just went, like I said, we wanted to ransom people, so we went to Amamaki and tried to ransom people. Like,
that worked really good.
yeah, it was horrible. Like we learned really quickly that we had no idea what was going on, and we died a lot and whatever. But I do think a lot of the time people have this sense that there's all this great stuff happening, but that it's unreachable. That like there's some 3-year ladder they have to climb before they get to the point that they're involved in the sort of stories that we might tell. And I don't think that's the case. I think right from the beginning you can plug yourself in a smaller way, and usually that leads to bigger things. And it's hard. I don't think it's easy. I think a lot of people get frustrated early on not knowing what angle to take to get themselves involved, but I think those angles do exist, and it's not quite as difficult as it seems, I guess.
Yeah, and the other thing to point out in EVE Online is like, so people think about this in other games, like in StarCraft 2, like battle cruisers typically, if you have max battle cruisers, you're gonna pretty much roll people no matter what. Like you've reached the end game, you have better things. Or in League of Legends, like the other team is level 18 and has maxed out gear or whatever. They're gonna beat you. But in EVE Online, that's not true. So like somebody who has like a pimped out Maelstrom, like faction fit artillery Maelstrom, can die to one frigate that costs as much as his ammo, significantly less than his ammo probably, because the frigate has been smarter, has engaged him better, has known what's going on more than that person did, and he's sort of like picked his battle, whereas the battleship has picked its battle improperly. Like there's no real end game ship in EVE Online, and that's something that really like adds this whole dynamic where in StarCraft 2, unless you're Terran and you're playing with Imba Marines, you're not really going back to your T1 units as like that's my staple fighting force. But or in League of Legends, you're not going like, I really need some Doran's blades right now at 40 minutes. Like, I really need like 5 Doran's blades like immediately. You sort of like, you're progressing towards a goal, but on EVE Online, like, a lot of people go like, they'll go up to a battleship and they'll be like, that's kind of fun. Let me get into a carrier. That's kind of fun. Let me get into Dread, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll go like, actually, what's the most fun is to go all the way back to the frigates you started in and roll around in like a Rifter or a Griffin and follow Kil2 and jam him with your Griffin that costs nothing. Or like roll around in a stealth bomber, which is also a frigate. Like there's all this depth back into the game and so much replayability of all the levels of play that you've been involved in previously, and sort of like picking out like one of the most dangerous ships in the game is Destroyer, which is like just a tier above the frigate, like. Or just a tier above that, like cruisers and T2 cruisers are probably some of the most versatile ships in the game. Like
Michael Bolton, you're telling the longest story, but all you're saying is that.
All right, whatever, Steve. You want?
It's the longest story.
Go
all
ahead.
I have to say. Let me summarize.
Okay, go ahead.
A great thing about Eve is that progression is nonlinear. Like, there is not a linear ladder of improvement to any of the systems in Eve.
Thanks, wise man. Kil2.
Which is great.
Summarizing
it means
Michael
you don't
story.
have to be an old player to have an effect on the game. Done. What's next?
Steve,
you tell him, Kil2.
Jeez.
You know you love it. You know you love it.
Go. Now you got the long version and you got the short version.
Oh, by the way, we have a CCP employee just messaged me on Skype. That story was super cool. It was a cool story, bro.
All right. Well, after that amazing story and the fantastic wrap up, let's take a little time and talk about esports. So coming into this, like, again, I come from a StarCraft background where within the StarCraft community, that is, for the most part, all they talk about. This idea of StarCraft being a profession for people, something that people can do for a living, whether that's talking about the game, whether that's playing the game, organizing tournaments, managing teams. It's all surrounded around this idea, or StarCraft, it seems to be around this idea of StarCraft. This game should be something more than just something I do to have fun. And if I remember correctly, ATX, there seemed to be a lot of talk about Eve and the possibility of Eve moving somewhere in that direction. Maybe not, it's not exactly clear exactly in what way, but I was hoping to sort of get the three of you to sort of talk to me about your own thoughts on Eve and the possibility of Eve being what you might call an esport or a competitive game.
Well,
I think CCP Bro should start.
Eve in its nature is a competitive game, but it is so in an entirely different manner than StarCraft or League of Legends. Putting up a structured format to host tournaments is an extremely hard thing to do in Eve, and a lot of people don't realize how much is going on behind the scenes at the Alliance tournament. But you have like putting up that tournament is a tremendous effort right now, and that of course puts in some obstacles. And when you talk about a game being esports, it's really it really sticks to the game being open to everyone, and everyone can be free to practice in that tournament setting. Without that openness and possibility, it's really hard to become pro at it without spending an excessive amount of time just theory crafting and visualizing things in your head, and then going in and like, all right, so this is how I imagined this tournament going, because you don't have the possibility to actually partake in a practice tournament or something along those lines. So of course there are a bunch of challenges, but with that being said, I know that the community loves the Alliance tournament, and they like that broadcast and they like that aspect of the game. But whether or not Eve will be subject to becoming an actual esport where there's like a team, like 15 teams that are actively getting sponsored and making a living off of playing this, and that is a really hard challenge, and I'm not sure it would be entirely consistent with the way Eve plays out normally, but it's definitely something that's worth looking into because it promotes a new type of gameplay for our players. But it would have to be done in such a way that it would be player generated in a large percentage of the actual esports scene would be completely player run, if we don't want to interfere with the way Eve plays out normally. So yeah, it's a possibility, but it's a hard one. And yeah, that's pretty much the basis of my thought process around Eve becoming esports. But it's definitely something coming from competitive League of Legends and following the esports scene, even in games that I don't play like StarCraft. I watch fighting games and stuff that I've never even played, and I don't know what's going on. I'm just watching it because these dudes are supposedly the best at that game. And a lot of the time I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, this doesn't look so hard. But then I actually see the guy sitting at his computers doing like 300 APM or whatever, and I'm like, well, all right, I might be a slightly worse player.
But
So
yeah. Sorry, please go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry, no, you go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna add, sort of going off of that. It's funny because I had the exact same thought, but I had it for Eve. I was watching ATX and I was thinking initially, I'm thinking this doesn't seem so bad. This seems pretty easy. And then Gimble has always been my guide through Eve, and so Gimble was sort of explaining to me, as I also listening to commentary too. But Gimble sort of giving me the baby version of what's going through the players' minds, what the players are thinking,
Yeah,
what the all the nuances that are being that are happening on the screen, and I'm just like blown away by the amount of the complexity and just the level of skill that goes into each one of those battles. And it's I had the same thought. It's funny because you're talking about fighting games and things like that, games you never played. I've never really done large scale PvP, but watching Eve, I had that same sort of feeling. Um, but actually, CC Pro, could I ask you really quick? This is deviating a little bit, but you were talking about all the things that go on to make the alliance tournament happen, and how it's difficult to sort of set that up on the fly.
yeah.
Can you maybe point out a couple, like tell us a couple of things, shed light on some of the difficulties?
Well, I mean, if you look at the broadcast that we're setting up behind the scenes, or let's just do it in its entirety. I mean, you have the couch where you have the presenters and the commentators and the guest that's doing that. Then you have two people in the commentary booth, and you have like 8 different cameras setting up in the studio, and then you got cameras in the commentary booth, and they have to have clients each that they can commentate on, and they have to see what the stream is seeing to be able to actually talk about the correct thing. And then you transition back, and then you have like GMs moving players into location and talking to the teams, explaining the rules, and letting them know what's happening at what point. And then you have people working the UI, setting that up. Then you have CCP Screegs monitoring the distance from the beacon and then manually blowing ships up if they leave that distance, and monitoring for any violations of the rules, illegally fitted modules, illegal implants, and so on and so on. And then you have CCP Loxy was doing the video mixing, so he was switching between cameras and so on. And then you have 3 camera guys, each operating their own camera. And then you have like the fourth camera, pretty much that's doing like the overview of the big, like with the tactical overlay and showing relative distances and so on. And then you have me doing the streaming side, monitoring that and talking to the stream chat and so on, and doing the recordings. And then you have like another guy that's doing the YouTube recordings and rendering them and doing all that. And that's pretty much the core of putting that up. Then you have other people doing like building the set, and then you got monitoring the forums and doing social media and community interaction and so on. So as you can hear, this is like a huge thing to set up, and
Well,
it's a lot.
can I extend a bit? It's
Yeah,
everything you've talked about is related to the actual show production, which is obviously a lot of work and a huge pain. But I
Yeah.
think the real obstacle in terms of making even esport is like lies in the actual tournament itself. You're talking about a tournament that had how many unique players participating? Something like what, 1,000 probably, if you consider all the
600.
logistics and all the practice partners and everything
Yeah,
like that. You're
probably.
talking about like hours and hours that went into like rules design, auctions for tournament slots, the structuring of the brackets, violations, and we had bannings before the tournament this year. Like
Yeah.
we had all this, like actually creating an Eve tournament just one is this enormous amount of man hours if you consider all the players. And then just logistically, you have a game that's spread equally over many different regions where each team has to come up with 12 people for a whole bunch of matches that are at times they're out of control of. It's the tournament in the way we see it during the Alliance tournament is something that couldn't happen on a regular basis. It would have to look different.
Yeah.
It would have to be
Yeah, it's true.
a
It's
lot
true.
of fixed and automated rules. It would have to be like maybe less players involved at a time so that alliances didn't have to fork over their 24 best PvPers around the clock to be practicing. Like, you're almost talking about, if you want it to look like the Alliance tournament, you're talking about taking a huge subset of the EVE player base and just removing it from standard EVE and putting it in this new game that is tournament combat, and it would have its own player base, and people would come into and out of it, but those people would be so committed they would be completely removed from normal EVE stuff, and that's just a huge thing. I mean, you're talking about a big obstacle just in terms of getting people there, making it happen all the time in terms
that's
of
true.
players.
Well,
And sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like the thing that in my head the biggest difficulty is not the people in the tournament or the setup for the tournament. This year we've improved our interface. CCP Veritas created the wonderful overlay that sort of like makes it infinitely easier to tell what's going on. You can sort of see the UR effects and all that sort of stuff. The biggest thing is not the people in the tournament, it's the people outside the tournament who might not want that tournament to happen. So, like, in EVE Online, if you don't want somebody to do something, like, a tournament would have to be published, people would know where it was, teams would have to go there. The current way that EVE Online works, there's nothing to prevent 200 dudes not involved in the tournament anyway just coming in and crashing the field and killing everyone. Or even just one dude in a stealth bomber. Like, that would need to be fixed. And then, like, the other thing... Let me finish.
No, I'm just saying, to be clear, that's not possible in the Alliance tournament. The way you describe that,
that's not
sounds like
possible in the Alliance tournament. Yeah, the way that, but if you were to have like a regular, if people were to come and try and do it, run it themselves in EVE Online, the risk is someone coming crashing the party. The other one is that there's no ladder, there's no ICT cup, there's no matchmaking system, there's no ELO rating for EVE Online. So like, if this were to exist, there would have to be something like that, so that the people who put in a lot of time into that sort of tournament setup can then play against other people that put in an equal amount of time or a relatively close skill level. And people who are bronze level players, or I don't know what the low ELO, they're from ELO hell or whatever in EVE Online, they can play against other people who are bad. That sort of doesn't really, and that's actually a great opportunity because like, there are people in EVE Online who don't PvP because they sort of know it's not their specialty, it's not their thing, and they'll just get crushed. If they have the opportunity to say like, oh, I can PvP against other people who are also bad at PvP, I think that might sort of start encouraging them into like more and more experiences in EVE Online that might be outside their normal comfort zone. But I think that the tournament would definitely require an interface designed by CCP, most likely, perfect setup, like a setup that would allow people to not only compete but also, like, hold on, I'm getting, someone's coming into my house. Not only to compete but then also to observe, and there's a whole setup that would need to be designed around it. But I think that once that setup is in place, the complexity of EVE Online, like the constantly evolving meta, every tournament has a new meta. And one module change can make a massive difference in a team of 12 people that might have 100 modules. Like, that sort of thing, that level of precision and care that each team can take to just get a small percentage edge, making sure their pilots know exactly what they're doing, that's the sort of thing that allows an esport to happen. There has to be a tremendous placement on skill and thought and execution.
Yeah.
That allows you to differentiate a skill level. I might have to go real quick or sign off.
We don't want you anyway. Get out of here.
I hate Bye.
Arn,
basically.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You. Well, I just wanted to talk a bit on what Michael Bolton was saying. When he was touching on the skill levels, the one thing that's really hard to portray in Eve is the difference in skill levels, because the game is not taking place, the tournament is not taking place in a pretty much two-dimensional field when you can see like the positions of everyone and so on. So portraying the importance of manual piloting and keeping range and overheating your modules or not overheating your modules, or cap management and so on. It's so much information that has to be portrayed to show the difference in skill, while at the same time it is there. It's really, the difference in skill is really has a big impact, and but portraying that to the viewer that doesn't necessarily know exactly what's going on could be a limitation. But at the same time, the complexity of Eve would be drawing in competitive players that actually want to invest time into learning all of that, because for a lot of pro teams, it's all about optimization, making things that are the best possible thing for that situation, like picking teams, counter picking item builds to counter your other team, or whatever. And it is there in Eve, but it's not as accessible as in, for instance, League of Legends or StarCraft, because you can't really see it on screen.
There was something else I wanted to ask you about that going along the lines, but I know Kil2, you had something you wanted to say first.
I was actually going to ask you something,
Sure.
like pretty directly related to what he's talking about, which was how you felt as someone who comes from traditional esports watching the Alliance tournament. Like, did what he's saying, did the fact that the information is hard to understand, that the actual moves by individual players are kind of inaccessible, did that stuff make it difficult to watch from the perspective of someone who's used to more traditional esports?
That's an excellent question. On one level, no. On another level, yes. On a basic level, there was, I could visually see ships being locked down. I could visually see missiles and lasers and turret fire, and I could see ships exploding. So on a very, very basic level, I could sort of get a sense of what's going on. But at the same time, a lot of the complexity, even with all the commentary, because I'm still a really, really new Eve player. A lot of the complexity and subtleties in modules and in why a certain ship was targeted and why they would switch targets, or why, even for example, even why a setup was ideal sometimes was a bit lost on me, and I would have a difficult time following the whole thing through, except with any real feeling like I could really capture everything was going on. It gave me a sense of awe, and while this is really amazing, I want to learn more about it, which is good. Like I left ATX wanting to learn more about PvP and sort of really understand it, but also feeling pretty daunted. Like when you go to League of Legends or I don't know, Dota or CS, Quake, all those. When I watch something like that, even if I haven't played it or fighting games, there's a lot of complexity there too, but I don't feel quite so daunted just trying to get into it. And I left Eve feeling really daunted. Like, I feel like I either need to invest a lot of time into this to really get it, or I'm never going to really understand it. That's sort of how I came out of it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the biggest like cause for skepticism for me in terms of an Eve as an esport. Like, I think of esports as being about, well, ultimately about sales, right? Like, it's about making a living.
Yeah.
It's about having some viability to making it professional, like you say, that people can actually do for a living, which means people have to want to watch it. So if you want to, like, for me, starting to talk about Eve as an esport should be based on how it is to watch, like how people feel when they go to invest time in actually watching an event. And even just fundamentally so different from most other esports, because I feel like most other esports, and tell me if I'm wrong, start with, they're like anchored on a very simple like type of gameplay. It's like chess or something, where the rules are very intuitive. It's like pretty quick to pick up most of the interactions, and then from there you get both drama and stories, which are really compelling, and then you also get kind of a constantly growing appreciation for the complexity of the game and how the skill ceiling is actually really high, even though the rules are pretty simple. And I feel like Eve is flipped upside down. Like you really quickly get a sense for the drama. Like you get a sense that there's stories happening and that you want to be interested in those, and that's really readily available. And you also really quickly get a sense that the skill ceiling is really high, but the game isn't anchored on something that you can relate to. And so, like for me, Eve as an esport all comes down to whether or not you can get people to watch it, despite the fact that it's really unintuitive. And so I don't know, I'm curious what, like it was hard to get a sense of how people felt about that as a commentator and as a person who's been like embedded in Eve for so long. You know, it's very hard for me to imagine what it's like for the random viewer who notices that there's 10,000 people watching the tournament on the own stream. And I feel like ultimately if we can't keep those people watching, there's no long-term esport in Eve, because those people are where the money come from, right?
By the
Yeah,
way, I'm
true.
still here.
Bummer.
Welcome.
People said some really productive stuff while you were gone, Michael Bolton.
Oh.
Well, yeah, Michael Bolton, CCC
Sure was
Pro,
very negative.
CCC Pro, do either of you want to speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's true what Kil2 is saying. The money ultimately comes from getting in new players and expanding the game and increasing the player base and creating excitement around the tournament scene and pretty much hooking new players. And that comes back into the point of, it's in most esports, when you watch them, you feel like a sense of satisfaction when you're able to predict someone's play by saying, like, for instance, when you're watching champion picking in League of Legends, you go like, all right, they're probably going to pick Nocturne there because he fits in with their team comp and so on, and they do that, and you're like, yeah, I'm thinking like a pro. You get satisfaction from that. In Eve, because of the amount of information that would appeal to the professional players of getting a really big challenge, it poses a lot. It puts a lot of burden of knowledge over to the viewer to be able to actually get that satisfaction, to be able to say like, all right, they're probably going to go for that ship next, but then they don't, and then they're like, why didn't they do it? And the answer is much more complex than someone can explain in a couple of minutes, or the commentators won't be able to actually explain the full scope of reasoning behind that will allow you to predict target changes in the future in the time period of the match while actually keeping up with the action. And I think that's a big problem because as you mentioned, Kil2, most esports are based on pretty simple games. I mean, if you look at
You know what's interesting though is what you mentioned, like the satisfaction of predicting picks or something actually is more like Eve, because for me, if I was to watch a League of Legends tournament, I don't have a clue about hero synergy or about builds or anything like that, and yet I could watch it. Like it, I think, I don't know. I guess there's elements that are more like even those games than I realize, or at least there can be, because I was more thinking about like just simple stuff like he got that kill because he hid in the bushes, which was really smart, which is like very intuitive. It doesn't have anything to do with character abilities or any like deep in-game knowledge. You can relate to it, and maybe there is some of that stuff in Eve. You know, like that Logi pilot died because the interceptor was really smart and went over and tackled him. Like maybe that sort of falls into the same category of that in like intuitive stuff, and the real obstacle is just the visual element that it's hard to notice when that happens. But the thing you're talking about of predicting people's plays, I think there's actually a lot of parallel there. Because like if I just picked up some random game, whatever it was, things like what you just described, I wouldn't have a clue about. Just like people wouldn't in Eve. But as they became more familiar, they would start to, you know, I think that's actually something awesome about it. Like when you talk about picks, like Arn, you were saying, you know, you didn't know why a team might have brought a specific setup. That's something that might be overwhelming, but as you started to watch, like if you watch, even if you just watch the entire Alliance tournament, you start to get a real sense of the way the setups perform in the meta, and you can start to make judgments even as a new player. I mean, my mom asked me why Hun Reloaded brought the Vargers every time, and she doesn't play Eve. Like I think that's a pretty good example of what Bro's talking about, that it doesn't take much actually before you start to make those try to make those judgments and figure out why people are doing what they're doing. So you know, maybe it's not so grim actually.
Well, can I?
Well, so
sorry, go ahead.
I just have one last thing to tack on. Like, I think that that's a very interesting point. But then there's also the fact that in EVE Online, unlike in StarCraft 2 and unlike in League of Legends, a lot of times the teams show up on field and this is the kit, this is what they have. Like, that's what they brought, and no matter what the other people brought, they're stuck with what they came with. And unless they had some sort of inside information or something that the viewer can't see, their impetus for bringing that. There's like when we see two teams show up on the field, a lot of the time as the commentators, as pretty high level viewers of the tournament, just in general as spectators, play out the match almost instantly in our heads, like what's going to happen here, like this primary is going to happen and this primary is going to happen, and depending on the outcome here, that's the end of the match. Like that's like the match is sealed. So, but if there was something like a pick and ban for EVE Online for the Alliance tournament, there was a ban rule that was a bad rule that sort of put people off the idea. But if there was something like, I bring this ship and now you bring this points and ships, and like there's sort of a back and forth, like I'm countering your picks as far as I can go, where you can see the meta, you can see the build evolving. Like half my pleasure when I watch StarCraft 2 or when I watch League of Legends is two people have blind set up builds or they have scouted at some point, and they're trying to play against what build they think they're going to compete against. But in EVE Online, it's sort of just like, oh, well, I guess this build is good and it beats these. I guess it will beat most, I'll just bring it.
Yeah, right. It's more like we spent 3 months spying and we think there's a 60% chance that they'll bring the setup they practice with more than anything else. And
that's 5 teams.
Well,
5 teams do that.
The only 5 worthy of an esport, maybe.
Well, that may be true, but that's not something that a spectator can see or be involved in intellectually in any way, because that encourages entire outside.
Well, no, I was going to say 2 things. I wanted to sort of after listening to everyone, I'm thinking more about ATX, which is really my first. It's the only AT I've ever watched. But thinking about it, I want to sort of not rescind, but adjust what I said, and I think it's that the commentary was amazing for me, because between that commentary and Gimble sort of, if I ask him specific questions about what this was or what that was or what this jargon meant, I felt like as a radio listener, I felt like I got it. Watching it was a completely different story. So visually, besides just the big explosions and seeing the shields and the armor and all that go down, visually it was really confusing to me. But just listening to the audio and having it explained, I could get the story there, but I couldn't follow on the screen, which sort of going off of that. The other thing that I think I'm hearing from Michael Bolton is the say League and well, to a degree CS and Quake, and well, definitely Quake, but also StarCraft, when you, from the start of the game to the end of the game, to me, when I compare them to EVE, they feel in some ways a lot more dynamic. That there's a lot more ability for a game to shift. But with EVE, the two teams bring setups, and they're set at the beginning of the game, and they will not change right now. At least in the Alliance tournament, they don't change until that match is over. There's
an evolution over the course of the match.
Yeah.
Whereas in EVE Online, the climax of the match in most matches, even between very good teams, occurs likely within the first 2 or 3 minutes in a 10-minute match, and that doesn't happen in almost any game, like unless you're like 6-pulling somebody. Like,
I think like, I don't know. The format we use now for the tournament, the format you saw in AT10, the 12 fixed players that come in and fight each other in an arena, is really enjoyable for the players, and everyone's very familiar with it that's been watching Alliance tournaments for a long time. And so there's a big argument for keeping it the way it is. But if you looked in the long term at EVE as an esport, there's so much room to create more dynamic like formats for the tournament to use. Like we've all often talked about a lot of different possibilities during the tournament when we're actually there in Iceland for the show, just kind of discussing possibilities. But EVE is actually a game that allows for like whatever you can imagine in terms of formats. Like you can do anything. So if we became convinced that there was a format that was going to be more fun to watch and had more evolution, I mean, the example is like at FanFest they did a mining tournament where there's an asteroid belt, and the asteroids get more valuable the closer you get to the center of the belt, and you can kill other people while you're in it. But over the course of the match, people are constantly struggling to get more minerals, and control might shift from one area of the asteroid belt to the other or something like that. And there is an evolution, and then at the end of the match, whoever has the most value in minerals wins. That's kind of silly. I don't think we're going to have a mining tournament for the Alliance tournament, but I think it's a good example of how the tournament could be shifted to a more dynamic
I think
format.
Whatever.
As soon as you could make a good case for the viewership, as long as you could say, you know, if we can make these changes, there's going to be 20,000 people watching Eve League every weekend, then people would be willing to do the work to figure out something really awesome to watch.
Whatever tool needs to be implemented is sort of has to be flexible, in that those rules can be set like that. It's a very daunting job for the programmers at CCP to say, like, I want a tool that lets people do whatever they want. But, like, that's the EVE mentality, is, like, you do whatever you want, and then whatever is the best will rise to the top, the cream will rise to the top. And then, like, if somebody discovers a setup, like, even if it's something as simple as like, one team picks 20 points and the other team picks 20 points, and you do that back and forth so you have 100. It could be something deeper than that, but, like, let the players figure out what they like best, let viewers figure out what they like best, and then CCP would sort of adopt that, or different leagues could adopt different rule sets. But it's very different than League of Legends, where the rules are the same every time, or StarCraft, where the rules are the same every time.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge, because you'd have to make specific rule sets, because the game isn't structured for esports. In a large, if you think about it on a large scale, the game really isn't structured towards esports. And even though the complexity is there and the opportunities are there, it's much more of a grind and hard work than it ever was in putting up League of Legends, StarCraft as an esport, as Michael Bolton walks away.
Yeah.
Just like,
whatever.
I don't want to listen to this. Welcome back. Did you have a nice walk?
No.
What a little stroll about. Was it fun?
People are coming in to look at our house to potentially buy it, so I have to, like, leave as soon as they arrive. So.
Gotcha. Well, real quick, I said we're gonna have a break. I lied. We'll wrap it up in a few minutes. But if anyone has questions, put the questions in now. If you put them in before, chat is exploded, and I have completely lost count because I've been absorbed in this conversation. So write them again, and I'll try and ask them after this. But I do have a question coming from Gimble, and that is, I know Dust is still under NDA, but generally speaking, what are your thoughts on Dust as an esport, or the potential for Dust as an esport?
Is that a question directed to me?
To all three of you, but maybe start with CCP Bro.
Well, I can't comment a lot on it,
Sure.
But I mean, it's a first-person shooter, and first-person shooters are but by design pretty open to become esports. So I can't comment on whether or not that is something that is developed to be or not, because I honestly just don't know. But the possibility, of course, is there. Whether or not it will be an esport, whether or not it will be an esport combined with EVE, that's just completely undecided at this point.
What do you think, MB3? You've actually played Dust.
Oh, you're right. You haven't played Dust. So
I'm not buying a PlayStation. Shoot.
Well, Dust 514 is currently under NDA, and my greatest recommendation would be probably to contact me again, because I'm talking with CCP Manifest, or potentially doing some more Dust 514 themed interviews later with different journalist groups. But I think that Dust 514 is a much more traditional game in the sense that it is clearly an FPS shooter. Right. And FPS shooters have a interesting history with esports. It's very hit or miss, but I think that Dust has a lot of depth, which is not traditionally the shooter sport genre. Shooter sport genre is typically like skill. You have super high level reaction times, you're very accurate, and you know movements on the maps, you know weapon interactions. But in Dust, there's group organization, there's fitting of your suits, like there's different sorts of combinations of vehicles that you might want to field, and there's the randomly generated battlefield, all sorts of things that you can have that sort of add this whole other side that might be appealing. Like, I don't really watch FPS esports. I watch RTS esports and MOBA esports, but I would probably watch Dust 514 because there's sort of that thought level of skill. Like, there's interesting intellectual interactions going on between the two teams that I really appreciate, and I think that it might give it an edge on other potential esports shooters. Like, I think Ubisoft is releasing their one where it's like 3 guys with sniper rifles, or 1 guy with sniper rifles versus 3 guys with a rocket launcher. They showed at E3.
Missed that.
And then there's, or the new thing where they just released Black Ops 2 is going to have an esports sort of set up in their new multiplayer trailer. So I think that might add like a new level of interaction. Obviously, the way that you view it is going to be very important. And
Sure.
It'll be interesting to see how that evolves. But send me an email or an email.
Can do.
I mean, I
Kil2.
can say,
Do you have any thoughts about
some-
Dust 514, the game
I
you
have some
haven't
really
played?
good insights about this. Yeah.
All right.
I have 2 things to say. One is that I know, even though I haven't played it, that like Bolton was just saying, Dust kind of takes some of Eve's style of choices, the fitting stuff. Is that right, Bolton? There's like fittings, more or less.
Yeah.
Which means your build is more complicated than just what gun you're using. And then there's also skill points, right? There's like character development in the long term. So between those 2 things, it seems like it has some potential to set itself apart. And I think that's great because unlike Eve, it has that familiar base mechanic that people can really easily visually relate to. So that kind of makes it more accessible, which seems good. The other thing I would say is that I know that from CCP's perspective, there would be a huge amount of support for the idea of combining the 2 games whenever possible. Like that, just from a marketing standpoint, that's amazing for them whenever that can happen. So if it's possible for them to make AT11 incorporate a Dust tournament as well or something like that, as basically anytime there's an Eve esport thing happening, CCP would be happy to have a Dust thing happening as well. So, looking at the long term, I don't know. I think with any FPS, it's got to do with execution. It has to do with like how fun the game actually is. But there's certainly going to be the hope there that it can at least follow Eve, if not lead the way for Eve in terms of, esports and kind of streaming and all that. So
Right.
We'll see, I guess.
We will see indeed. And closer to, I'm sure I'll get everybody back. Even if you haven't played, I'll find an excuse to get you back, Kil2.
What?
Are you gonna try Dust? Do you plan to try Dust?
I'm gonna try Dust the second they put it on the PC. I'm gonna be there.
You and me both. All right. Well, there you go. Well, when it comes out on PC, we'll get you back on then.
Perfect.
You can tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, don't have me on to talk about PlayStation games and playing games with a controller. I won't be a very fun member of the conversation.
Oh, but wait. You'll be able to play it with a keyboard and mouse pretty soon.
Oh.
Yeah, but probably not. Well, yeah. Great.
Yeah. If you buy a PS3.
If you buy a PS3.
Buy a PS3, yeah.
Maybe. That's a long way off for some of us.
Hey, it plays Blu-ray. Or wait, yeah, Blu-ray.
But so does my computer.
Yeah, but it plays Blu-ray in a shiny.
Do people actually own like discs with things on them anymore? Do
I
you
do.
guys actually have like movies that you hold in
Yeah.
your hand?
I actually don't.
I have the entire Fast and the Furious collection on
That's
Blu-ray.
a good choice. If you're gonna
Yeah.
own movies in hard copy, you might as well start with Fast and the Furious.
Fantastic. It's the first collection I ever owned. It's just
Well done.
beautiful.
Well done indeed. All right, guys. Last chance to submit questions, and I'll get any. I haven't seen any yet. I know there's a huge discussion going on, but if anyone has questions, put them in, and I'll try and get them asked. But before that, normally I would try and do a whole second half asking you guys more about yourself, but we've gone on for way too long.
We're not very interesting.
No, don't say that. That's not true. That's obviously not true. We've been talking for an hour and a half, and if I could, we'd keep going, but I don't want to keep everyone here forever.
Michael Bolton's actually in the process of becoming homeless. I wish we could talk about that.
I didn't want to pry the issue, but
They're selling my house while I talk on the internet. Like, really sad story, but
when people move out of homes, they sell them. They have to go on market. It's the way selling homes works.
You're like, I have to hide when they show the house.
Do you stay in the house when they show your house? You leave
I
the
don't know,
house.
man. Nobody's ever foreclosed on my house. I don't know how it works.
Foreclosing on my house. I'm selling my house through my parents are selling the house through a realtor. A realtor is selling the house.
All right. I'm very sorry.
Involved.
I won't talk about your house
If
anymore.
anyone wants to rent a house east of Baltimore,
I have a garage.
Not
If you end up really stuck, you can stay in it. Just call me.
All right, we got some questions. We're gonna move away from houses and we're gonna talk about what we call the final four. I'm gonna ask each of you, and that is, to give you a heads up, it is favorite music, movies, books, and food. And I'll just run through all of them one person at a time. But while you think about that, there are a couple questions people have.
Well, say them again real quick.
Music, movies, books, food. It can be like stuff you've recently enjoyed, all-time favorites, something you'd recommend to someone, whatever. But give people something to check out. Question for CCP Bro from Dalpa, which is to ask about Eve's streamers page, he said whatever you're planning on pitching and how that's going. If you could talk about that.
That's certainly something that we're looking into. What he's referring to is a page that lists all the active Eve streams, so they're easily accessible. Because right now, when you go to either Twitch or On3D or some other place, finding the Eve streams can be pretty hard because you're gonna have to search for the game and so on, because they're not just front page. But whether or not this is going to be a CCP page listing the active streams or something that we want to leave up to the community has not been decided yet, because I think this would, with the emergence of the streaming community for Eve, this creates an opportunity for the player base to capitalize on that and create a web page dedicated to streaming and streaming news and promoting streams and so on. And that's not an opportunity that we want to take away from our player base. So at the moment, I can't tell you anything definitive.
And off he goes again. Fair enough. Since Michael Bolton has just decided he needs to scoot again, we'll start with.
Hold on, I need to go do mine really fast.
Okay.
Leave immediately.
Go.
Okay, wait, do them for me.
Music.
Me off. I
Start
can't
with
remember.
Music. Start with music.
Music. I play EVE Online, dubstep only.
Okay. Movies.
Movies. I just watched Total Recall, and it reminded me that I loved the original Total Recall.
All
Not
right.
so much the new one. Don't go see the new one.
Okay, there you go. See the original. Books.
Books. I'm reading American Gods by Neil Gaiman right now. It's pretty good.
That's a great one. Food. Favorite dish.
Favorite food, Pop-Tarts. Cinnamon Pop-Tarts.
All right. Any quick shout-outs you want to do?
Quick shouts, test lines, please ignore, CCP, EveOnline.com.
Shout out to me,
University of Maryland. Shout out to Michael Bolton III. Shout out to the real Michael Bolton. Shout out to University of Maryland College Park Collegiate StarCraft League. If you're at University of Maryland College Park, join the CSL team. We're really good at StarCraft 2. Some of us more than others. And shout out to CF's, the Cluster F Coalition, and Honey Badger Coalition. Boom. EVE Online, spaceships. It's a good game.
All right, we'll let you go. Thanks.
All right, bye-bye. Bye.
See you, man.
Okay, we don't have to be quite so rapid fire. All right, let's go into it. Let's start with Kil2. Give us favorite music.
I'm gonna say, like Michael Bolton did, dubstep only for spaceship pilots, and actually specifically Nero. I've been running a Nero Pandora channel for my stream, and that's been paying off, I think.
All right, movies, film.
Let's say Gladiator because it has elite PvP.
Well done. Books.
Books was the hardest. I think that I'm gonna say I look back at my bookshelf and I have like only dorky sci-fi fantasy books, poker books, and like Greek philosophy. So, any of those are fine, but I would choose poker over any of them. So why don't I be as cliche as possible with poker books and say Super System?
All right.
Ah, wow. I knew you were going to say that.
I actually don't like Super System as much as some of the other books I've read, but I can't remember which they were, so I'm just gonna stick with that. It's fine.
All right, fair enough. Food.
I love pizza, and there's a pizza place down the street called Hot Lips Pizza that is a Portland-only pizza place, and it's really fantastic.
Damn. Well,
Boom.
I guess I'll have to go to Portland now.
Fair trade pepperoni all day, whatever that means.
It sounds good. Shout-outs. We'll just go ahead and do shout-outs.
I think the only shout out I'll do is to Spensley in your Twitch chat, who is apparently a person that started playing because of the Alliance tournament and started a stream on day one and has made content apparently that he is very excited about. Has good stories already after only a few weeks in the game. So shout out to Spensley and any other players like him that have picked up Eve and are enjoying it.
Perfect. Wow. CCP bro, you're up
Yes.
next. Music.
This is a hard one. I listen to all sorts of music. Probably my favorite artist is, don't bash me for this, but it's probably R. Kelly. I listen to a lot of R. Kelly. I like his music, but at the same time, the radio station I have on in my car every single time I drive is like 70s and 60s music. So I go back and forth.
Back and forth. All right. Well, give me a song since it's not. I think most people know dubstep or a lot of popular dubstep remixes and songs now. So give me an R. Kelly or a 60s, 70s song.
An R. Kelly song? Probably go with either Religious from Untitled or Echo from Untitled. Both songs are amazing.
All right. I'll give them a
You
listen.
guys can check those out.
Sounds good. Movies. What's your favorite movie or a really good recent movie? Or a really good movie in general?
Really good movie. La Vita è Bella is probably my favorite movie of all time. It's like, I don't know, from 97 or something, an Italian movie directed by Roberto Benigni. And if you haven't watched it, I recommend you do because it makes grown men cry. It's about the prosecution of Jews in the Second World War in Italy, and it's like a love story and family story, and it's beautiful.
All right. Well, I will add it to my list. It sounds heavy, but if you recommend it, it also sounds
It is pretty heavy, but it won the Oscar for Best Foreign Film, so it's a good one.
What about books? Favorite books?
Favorite book would probably be Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's my. I enjoyed reading it so much. I just can't get it out of my head. And for Spensley, 50 Shades of Grey. I haven't actually read it, but
just because you didn't want anyone to say it, you had to say it.
Yeah, but I went on to a stream the other day, and they were reading a chapter from 50 Shades of Grey on stream, and for some reason I couldn't stop listening. But it was hilarious, and I think it's like one of these things. It's so shocking. It's like the media coverage around it puts it up as so shocking that people don't realize how badly it is written. It's just like, oh, it's like this dirty book, but it's horribly written, and it's just like, it's just really bad, and I find that hilarious. So I might need to read it to laugh at it.
You can tell us all what it's like. I haven't touched it yet. Everyone I know though has. It's interesting. Moving on, food. What have we got for food?
Food. Probably be lasagna.
Lasagna.
It's my mother's lasagna. It's amazing.
Perfect. Is there anything special about the lasagna? Anything you can make us all really, really hungry with?
Not really. She hasn't let me in on the secret, but there's some secret that makes it delicious.
All right. Well, if you find out that secret and you can share it with us, so we can all make delicious lasagna and enjoy it just like you do, you should do that.
Sounds good.
All right. Any shout outs you'd like to do? Close up.
Um, I just want to give a shout out to the Eve player base and to all of the people that stuck with us through this entire broadcast. Without our fantastic players, whether or not they're mean and vicious or care bears and miners and everything, they create this game that has given me the opportunity to work at something that I love and come on this show and talk about stuff that I love. So those guys deserve a big shout out. Keep playing, you guys.
Can't argue with that. As a way of closing for both of you, is there anything that we haven't touched on or didn't talk enough about that you'd like to say?
The one thing I was just thinking of is that even though we've sort of peripherally been talking about esports and streaming and stuff, I really think that anything we can do to encourage people to both watch streams and make their own streams. Basically, the more content people can generate around EVE right now, the better it's going to be for the game as an esport and as a spectator thing in the long run. So just kind of, yeah, I'm surprised we didn't talk about that more, because I feel like that's kind of the step towards esports is just player generated content, not in-game content, but viewable content that's out there for people to watch. And I've started doing some of that. Some others have done it before me, and there's more doing it now. But we need more. I mean, it needs as much attention as possible. So the more people that can get out and watch EVE streams and support them and make their own, so there's more content, the better. So definitely just would encourage people to look into that part of the community as much as possible.
Well, actually, speaking of which, you just brought an idea to mind. If we can, I'll talk to you both later on, but if possible, I'd love to get you both back to really focus in on that topic. And if I can, I'd like to bring in a couple people in particular from the StarCraft community, because I think StarCraft has the opposite problem. There's actually an oversaturation of user-produced content, and so I'd love to get a discussion going about that in-between state, or about what EVE is looking to do, or what the players looking to do, how they're looking to sort of increase that user-generated content, and at the same time, StarCraft, which is in the opposite situation, which is too many people are sort of trying to get content out there, and so that people are actually starting to lose interest in the game because there's too many things going on simultaneously. But we'll talk later about that.
That's a really interesting contrast.
Yeah,
it's definitely
but
opposite problems.
That's a whole show. I think that discussion about user-generated content, the benefits, the drawbacks, and sort of all the steps in between is something I'd love to talk about later on. But CCC Bro, is there anything that you'd like to touch on that we haven't said yet?
Not really. Apart from what Kil2 just said, I think we covered most bases related to esports, but of course, the biggest obstacle is getting the foundation and the viewer base and the interest up, and that's done through making EVE more of a spectator sport. And for me, that's done through streaming, because it gives you like a live perspective of how hard it can be to find fights and so on, and tactics used. So I just say, like, I'm working almost exclusively right now at towards promoting streaming and helping the streaming community take off. And so everyone, if you pick up an EVE stream and find someone you like, hit the follow button, share a stream, get your friends viewing, and then help us grow this community.
Sounds like a good idea. I'm sure everyone will. Thank you guys so much. I apologize to everyone that my knowledge of EVE is still quite lacking. I hope everyone else has had a good, enjoyed it. I don't know. I just feel like I learned a lot, but I'm worried that a lot of the more experienced EVE players have sort of heard all this before. But for me, it was all new, or a lot of it was new, and so it was a real pleasure to have, well, 3 of you and now 2 of you still on, have you guys on to really share your insight, to share your thoughts. It shows me there's a lot more still to learn about EVE, but also a lot going for it. Excuse me. So I just want to thank you guys again for taking the time to come on the show, because it's been almost an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been great. I have to say, for your concern about not being an EVE player, you've done a really fine job. I don't think most people have heard most of this stuff. were discussing talked about much at all, and I've been in some really terrible EVE interviews, and this was not one of them. So
I appreciate the compliment. That puts my heart at ease. No, I mean, and I would love to, Gimble, I think it just is a way of closing. Gimble is someone who I think has really spearheaded this for me and really got me into the really competitive aspect of EVE and sort of showed that to me and really tried to push that also within Definitive Esports, the journalism company that we're both with, and really trying to get that out there. And so I'm really starting to get more and more interested and excited about where EVE is also headed for me as a spectator, not just because I'm not much of a player right now, but I love the idea of what EVE offers, and so getting a chance to talk to you guys about sort of the future and where it might go and what your thoughts are has been really cool. So thank you for that, and hopefully we will get you back to some point to talk more about it when it's a little farther on.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you very much, guys, and to everyone watching, thank you as well. We don't yet have guests for next week. We're tentatively talking to Sir Scoots sometime in the future from Team Evil Geniuses. We're also talking with a couple others. We're talking with Complexity still, trying to get some of their players on. And we're really hoping to branch out to the fighting game community as well. So we're really, EVE is sort of our first step into really trying to not be just StarCraft, to really learn and have discussions with other competitive scenes and increase that exposure for everyone. So that's our goal. That's what we're working towards. In the coming week, we'll let you know who we've got when we get it locked down. Thanks, everyone.